Hey guys, thanks so much for joining us as we conclude our Foolproofing Your Life series today. I'm so excited for what this series has been for us and excited to see what we've got in store for today. So without further ado, let's jump in. So, Thursday of last week, it's late afternoon, almost dinner time, and Madeline and I are going about doing our normal Thursday afternoon things. We're hard at work and all that, when all of a sudden, our phones get this notification. I mean, I had seen the clouds getting darker and I could hear the thunder and all that kind of stuff. I knew an afternoon, one of those good summer thunderstorms was coming in, but this warning on our phones that went off at the same time said, there's a tornado warning. So I go out and I give my neighbor a hard time because I could see that he was just walking back with his dog on a walk, and I was like, are you crazy for being out when it's a storm coming? And thought it was going to be no big deal, but then when I go outside I can see this thing is really scary looking, and it also, the thunder that I've been hearing wasn't stopping, so it started to sound more and more like a train. And what I know of thunderstorms and tornado warnings is that when you hear a train sound, that is usually not a good thing. And so anyway, we got inside, and within like a few minutes, if that, all of a sudden it's starting to rain, but then it's starting to hail, and it is like booming and shaking our house with the thunder, and it just starts hailing and hailing and hailing, and the rain starts pouring and the wind starts whipping in. This storm came in real quick. So normally I love thunderstorms, but I kind of followed Madeline's lead, and yeah, let's go downstairs. Let's just play it safe with this one. Go downstairs. And I mean, just the wind is whipping everything past, and we just couldn't even hear a thing because the storm was just so loud as it just whipped past our house. Eventually it passed, and we walked out, and we started like surveying the damage, not only of our own backyard and our own house and things like that, but our neighbor had a tree branch go down on top of one of their cars, and we wanted to walk and see. So our little cul-de-sac neighborhood started walking around and surveying all of the, even some of us getting in a car and driving to the neighborhood behind ours where it went through our backyard and went into their neighborhood to see what had happened there. But the big question for us was this a literal tornado or just something really darn close? I mean, we even saw a chopper at one time flying overhead, probably trying to assess the same thing. Was this a tornado? And I know that you can determine some of that in the actual moment when the storm's happening, but really the usual thing is afterwards. You can learn a lot by taking stock of what's left in its wake. And I even asked a friend who's in our house church if he wouldn't mind. He did this great drone footage of the damage and the line that went through our backyard, because you can usually tell what is going on when you look at what's left in its wake. And in a lot of ways, I think that's true about understanding the character and substance of people. You can observe a lot directly, yes, and yet you can also observe a lot by looking at what's left in their wake. And I wonder, let's just kind of ask the question here today, what's left in your wake? In the wake of you being somewhere or in a situation or having an impact on a person, what's left in your wake? For the past 6 weeks now, we've been in a series called Foolproofing Your Life, a study that's had us digging deep into the biblical book of Proverbs, a summer series where we just wanted to mine all of the wisdom that we could in just 7 short weeks from this book. And what have we seen so far? Well, we've seen that the wise person trusts in God. They walk in humility, seeks wise counsel, exercises self-control, uses words wisely, and manages the resources well. And I was curious because at the end of the series, we've been doing so much pulling from so many verses in Proverbs. I was curious how many verses that we had touched on in this whole 6 weeks so far. And in just 6 weeks so far, we have talked about 174 verses in Proverbs. We've touched on 174. But a lot of the focus has been, or at least it could be, in all of those 174, on how being wise or foolish affects your life. I mean, the freedom that you experience when you trust in God, the benefits that you experience from being humble instead of proud, the mistakes that you avoid by seeking wise counsel, right? We talked about the freedom that you experience by having self-control. We talked about the advantages that you experience by managing your resources well. When we talked about using our words wisely, it was definitely more obvious at that point then how you weren't the only one winning if you choose to foolproof your life and walk in wisdom. But today, as we end the series, it's going to be more obvious than maybe it has been in this whole series that the choices we make on a daily basis, and then in weekly routines that we have, and then monthly accomplishments, and as the years of our lives add up and add up, the wisdom that we do live in or we don't live in, well, that's going to profoundly affect the world around us, the people around us. There is an imprint that your life leaves on others from your actions, your words, and honestly, even just your inner thoughts. It leaves an impact. If the chopper could somehow get up high enough for a bird's eye view of your life, of my life, the question, what's left in the wake of your life? What would it see? And of those 174 verses we read, a lot of them had what they would do is they'd have these two contrasting realities that were being compared to each other. So let me offer that that as we get to our topic of today, is the wake of your life peace and justice, or is it chaos, strife, and vengeance? What's left in your wake? Towards the beginning of the book of Solomon, or the book of Proverbs, Solomon is still pleading his case for why the rest of the book of Proverbs and why all those little nuggets are worth paying careful attention to. And look back at what he says in chapter 3 in the first two verses. He says, "My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you." At the end of the day, in general, the wisdom of God that you find in Proverbs is meant to extend your life and add peace to it. It's meant to help you be at peace with God in your relationship with Him, peace within yourself, that you're not constantly anxious and experiencing chaos within. It offers a peace with others, that you're able to find profound ways to work with others and get along with them. In fact, chapter 16 says, when a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. See, it's one thing to get your best friends to be at peace with you. And that sometimes isn't even always super easy, but it's quite another to get your enemies to be at peace with you. It takes a strong, calm, focused effort and wise way of working in order to do that. So I want to have us explore what it looks like biblically to be people who are wise enough to be people of peace. What it looks like to not only enjoy that peace personally, but to leave it with the people who come in contact with you. We're going to take this journey by asking 4 questions today. And I got to warn you, they're going to be rather pointed questions, but they're going to hopefully help us to really understand what it looks like for us to be people of peace who are wise in how we leave peace in the world around us. So the first question is, do you even get it? Like, do you even get what peace is? If we don't get peace, it's hard to get peace. Like if it's about keeping the peace, if we think that's what having peace is keeping the peace, never stirring the pot or speaking up or confronting or just honestly sharing what we're thinking and feeling, then we're not going to have peace. You're not going to have peace. But if you also don't get that there are good ways and bad ways, healthy ways and unhealthy ways of doing those things I just mentioned, well then you're okay with doing all of them, stirring the pot, mentioning what you're feeling and all kind of stuff, but you haven't learned to do it well. And in that case then, well, you're not going to have peace either. If you don't get peace, you won't get peace. Proverbs 28 says it this way: evil men do not understand justice, but those who seek the Lord understand it completely. So, it's interesting. In earnestly seeking after Jesus and getting to know Him, seeing Him for who He really is and listening to Him as He speaks to our hearts, we grow in understanding justice. We get what's right and what's wrong, what is just and what's unjust, what brings about peace and what brings about discord. And look at what else Proverbs says when it comes to understanding what leads to peace. in chapter 29, it says, "A righteous man knows the rights of the poor. A wicked man does not understand such knowledge." A righteous and godly man or woman knows the real rights of the poor, the disadvantaged, the potentially overlooked, the people that maybe just aren't in your in-group and all that. They get where those rights for that person truly come from, what that means for that person as well as for themselves and how they treat them. They get that peace can't truly come unless they continue to grow in their understanding. Continue to ask questions like, well, what's leading to this challenging situation? What are the real causes and what are helpful solutions to this moment of injustice or where there's not peace, there's discord? Because sometimes a lack of understanding turns what is meant to be helping into actually hurting somebody if you don't understand what's going on. And the righteous person, I want to make sure we all get this, the righteous person doesn't strive to understand justice from a Republican or a Democrat or independent perspective, but from a godly and biblical one. Since God is just, knowing Him more and more helps us to understand justice more and more. Let me ask you this. What have you learned about justice from God lately? I know it wasn't too long ago we did the Peacemakers series, but I'm curious, what has God spoken to you about His peace and what it looks like to make peace in His world, in His way? But let me just tell you this. At the end of the day, understanding, as important as understanding is not going to be enough on its own. I once heard it said that the best way to know the difference between understanding and wisdom, which is what we're talking a lot about in this series, is to think of tomatoes. Because understanding acknowledges that a tomato is, in fact, a fruit. But wisdom, though, realizes it would be foolish to try and put that in a fruit salad, though. So knowledge needs to meet wisdom, and wisdom often does something. So here's our second question. Do you get it if you don't act on it? Do you get it if you don't act on it? You should probably go to the dentist again. That's what I've been telling myself for month after month for the last couple of years. Like, I could probably try if I really wanted to and remember, but I still can't, like exactly how long it's been since I had last gone to the dentist. In part because 2020 was, as you know, like this weird time vacuum where I lost track of how long it had been since certain things. And I know it had been before the pandemic hit, but how long before that? A month, 3 months, 5 months, a year, 5 years? I don't know. Probably not 5 years. I know it wasn't 5 years. But anyway, I knew it had been long enough that I really should go to the dentist. But how many times, let's be honest, have we all been there where we say, man, I really should do something, or whatever it is, not necessarily the dentist, but something, man, I really should do this. But then whatever noble or important thing that had come to our mind and out of our mouth maybe after that never got beyond that. Like it never actually happened. There's been moments where you said it, you're like, man, I really should, but you never ended up doing anything more than words or a thought that you had. And that's how peace can be for too many people too. We can think that it would be so good if our lives were more peaceful. It'd be so good if we were at more peace with God or if we were at more peace with others, but that takes understanding and action. And sometimes we prove that we don't actually understand just how important peace is because we don't act. We think of it like flossing. In theory, it's really important. We should totally do that. But in reality, we don't see it as important enough to actually pursue it, to do it. We clearly don't understand how significant peace and justice are to the mission that God has called us to in that moment then. The proof of understanding is acting. And Proverbs is going to be pretty direct about not acting. I mean, look at chapter 24, verses 10 through 12. It says, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. Well, thanks, Solomon. That was sweet of you to say. Nice. Anyway, he goes on and says, rescue those who are being taken away to death. Hold back those who are stumbling to the slaughter. If you say, behold, we did not know this, does not he who weighs the hearts perceive it? Does not he who keeps watch over your soul know it? And will he not repay man according to his work? rescue those who are being taken away to death. Now, we're not entirely sure if this is referring to rescuing those who are suffering under injustice and wickedness in the world from others, or if it's referring to rescuing those who are willingly walking the path that leads to death. But either way, we are meant to step in and hold them back with whatever we can from that destruction. And then it goes on and says, if you say, behold, we did not know this. Listen, y'all. We, in that verse right there, when God says, Solomon, I want you to write this, and Solomon writes, if you say, behold, we did not know this, we just got busted. Like, I don't know if you see it or not, but we totally just got called out. Like, I don't know if your parents ever did this thing to you, but the thing where you get called out for the thing your mama knows you ain't done yet, but she knows you're gonna wanna do. Like, and don't you try and give me a hard time when I say it's time to go, because I won't have that, okay? So when I pick you up to get you to go, don't you do that. Like, is she a time traveler? Like, I just got to the party. I just got here, Ma, and she isn't picking me up for hours from now. Why is she saying that about what's gonna happen? It's because she knows in that moment the proclivity of my heart, what I'm gonna wanna do. And God knows the proclivity of the human heart. The heart that apparently he knows would be tempted to plead ignorance on knowing what destruction others are facing in their lives. The proclivity for us to try to find a way out of helping others. It goes on and says, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who keeps watch over your soul know it? And will not he repay man according to his work? Now, I can't be sure if that last part about talking about repayment is an encouragement for if we decide to step up and step in and act, or a threat if we don't. But the reality is that God does, in fact, see our hearts and see through our excuses and our reasoning for why we do and don't do what we do and don't do. And he rewards us for what we do. Proverbs 25 says, if your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. And if he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. Underline that. And the Lord will reward you. But it's not just our enemies that God calls us to love in this way. He says in chapter 31, he says, open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth. Judge righteously. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. I gotta be honest, I've been so concerned over the last number of years about how the church has reacted to social issues or not reacted to social issues going on around us, like in our country and things like that. How we've allowed so many things, almost everything it seems now, to be categorized as political. Like that's political. And then we decide to not be political. So instead what we want these flowery preaching in our churches that maybe occasionally convicts us to be more intentional about pursuing God and prayer and reading the Bible. And then also we need to love people, but it's super vague about what that even means to love people. And in an attempt to become apolitical, we've forgotten that the rights of unborn babies and black men, the rights of the immigrant woman and the rights of a middle-class man are not political rights. They're not something that America gets the first word on. God does. God already has spoken about it. God already installed those rights into those people. And he calls us to open up our mouths for the mute, for the ones who are voiceless or who aren't being listened to. If we have a platform, God literally demands that we use it to show real, practical love to those people. Fight for the rights of the destitute instead of fighting to argue of why they maybe earned their destitution, earned that rough situation they're in. Now, it also said, just so we're clear, to judge righteously. So we do need God's help to navigate making the best judgments that really do the best care for what God cares for. But we can't say that we love God and then not act on behalf of the ones God loves, not speak up when God has told us to do that. There's a discord there. There's a disconnect. Now, it's not just inaction that sometimes keeps us from peace, which leads me to my third question, which is simply this. Can you really expect peace if you plant strife? Can you or I really expect peace if we plant strife? Strife is it's a word that we see a lot in Proverbs that speaks of contention and discord. And I want you to kind of see that like strife is dividing instead of uniting. It's cutting instead of healing. It's complaining instead of commending. It's tearing down instead of building up. Now, obviously, strife isn't something that Proverbs is going to then celebrate because of that. In fact, Proverbs 17:1 says, "Better is a dry morsel with quiet than a house full of feasting with strife." It's better to starve than have strife, is what it's saying. But sometimes we know that something's bad and we still do it anyway. And then we're surprised when we get the results that were bound to happen with it. So let's take these warnings that Proverbs offers to us pretty seriously. Proverbs 26:20, "For lack of wood, the fire goes out, and where there is no whisperer, quarreling ceases." So it's basically, gossiping doesn't heal hurts. It fuels the fire that creates more hurts. So unless you want more pain, don't gossip. Don't whisper. Don't spread news. Don't talk about other people. Proverbs 26:21 says, "As charcoal to hot embers," we're on this fire theme here, "and wood to fire, so is a quarrelsome man for kindling strife." So now we're talking about quarreling. And quarreling is that sense of arguing with people. I don't know if you've seen that around or you've been a part of it and you're willing to call yourself out for it. But these are the ways that we, whether it's quarreling or gossiping or whatever, we plant strife. You may want peace in your life. And you can say that. I can say that all that we want to say it. We can keep on going, man, I want more peace in my life. I really want more peace with God, more peace with others. I want less drama. I want more peace in my life. But if you want to harvest some corn, you can't only plant tomato seeds. And if you want to harvest a good husband, you can't only date players. And if you want to harvest peace, you can't plant strife. Like it doesn't make sense. You can't go and get one, because every seed of strife that you plant, that I would plant by gossiping about people, talking badly about them, contending and quarreling with them, isn't going to somehow magically transform in the soil of your life somehow into a peace plant. No, seeds of strife grow into fields of strife. For some of us, maybe God wants to lovingly reveal to us what the fields are showing us about what we've been planting. So be careful what you plant by your words and by your actions and by your thoughts. Because Proverbs 10:12 says that hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses. And it shouldn't surprise us here that hating someone or a group of someone's leads to strife with them. But love covers all offenses. See, love chooses to release the hurt that you've experienced, to forgive the infraction that they've done, to give grace to the person who needs it in that moment. I just want to say, thank God that He chose to have His love cover all of my offenses and your offenses, right? Like, thank God that He doesn't expect us to be perfect, that He's willing to cover our offenses with His love. What an honor to that covering love of Jesus it would be if we were willing to show that to someone else as well. And I don't know about you, but in the moment of pain, when I'm feeling in that moment disrespected, devalued, betrayed, abandoned, maligned, taken advantage of, attacked, or whatever it might be, when I'm in the moment, I'm not feeling a strong, compelling desire to cover all offenses. Honestly, I'm feeling a stronger desire to throw hands. Okay, maybe not literally, but figuratively for sure. And with my words, I'm often tempted to just come at that person. Or maybe not directly approach the person who's offended or hurt me, who is just bothering the mess out of me. Sometimes it's a lot more indirectly that I want to mess them up and see them get what I think they deserve. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but it's true, because this isn't the part of me that I'm talking about here that's the fruit of the Spirit of God at work in me. It's the part of me we call the flesh, the part of my sinful nature that I am called, just as you are, to crucify daily. To let that part that still wants to kind of creep in and all that kind of stuff die daily. Meaning that we've got to put those desires to death on the regular. So the fourth question is simply this: can you expect peace if you crave revenge? This is actually a pretty good question to ask. Can you expect peace if you crave revenge? Because revenge is so appealing, isn't it? Gosh, It sounds and looks so good. Like a triple chocolate cake. It's decadent, but the cake has something fishy in it. Proverbs 26:27 says it this way. It says, whoever digs a pit will fall into it. So you're digging a pit for someone else, but you fall into it. And a stone will come back on him who starts it rolling. When I read this proverb, I can't help but think of Wile E. Coyote. Like, any of y'all know about like that character from the old cartoons? For me, I used to love watching those cartoons on Saturday mornings in my PJs and watch the Wile E. Coyote. That silly coyote was always trying to get the Roadrunner. He was determined to enact his vengeance out on that feathery foe of his. So he was constantly coming up with different ways to trap or kill or attack or whatever it might be. He'd dig the pit to entrap the bird, or he'd poise the stone to go ahead and crush it. But inevitably, like this proverb says, the trap that he set caught him, or crushed him, or for a lot of the moments that I would watch it, the dynamite would blow him up. The wisdom that we need to gain in this life is that our vengeance doesn't actually work for us. It works against us. Even if we can get some sort of revenge, even if we can get that sense of like, we're going to make things right by getting revenge, it doesn't, hear me out, it's not going to heal the hurt of your heart. Only God can really do that. You getting revenge against that person, you getting them back, it maybe in the moment, let's be honest, might feel a little bit good, but it's not going to heal your heart. And God even promises in His Word that He's going to enact justice. Things are going to be made right. Whether it's because they were made right by what was done at the cross, and hopefully we're accepting that ourselves and that grace that He gives, and it was paid for, or they're going to pay for it. He's keeping score, and He's going to make sure that things get taken care of. He's wise enough, God is, and He's perfect enough to handle justice perfectly. For us, it can get really unhealthy really fast when we try to do it. Which is why Proverbs 24:17 and 18 says, don't even rejoice when your enemy falls. And let not your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest the Lord see it and be displeased and turn away His anger from him. In fact, He's kind of saying, like, it's wild when you think about it. It's saying that God is a God of justice. That's already known in the Bible. God's a God of justice. But that if we find too much pleasure in watching it get dished out to someone else that we think, man, they deserve it, if we enjoy it too much, find too much pleasure in it, He might just hold off what they kind of deserve and what they're getting because of what it's doing to us and to our hearts. It reminds me of when King David was anointed to be king, but he wasn't king yet. He was just David. And King Saul was actually still in power and was trying to attack him, was making his life miserable. And in this moment, Saul had just died, actually, out on a battlefield far away from David. And a messenger who told David this news that Saul's dead and you're king now, thought that David would be so happy that that had happened that he kind of alluded to like him being a part of why Saul was dead. Instead of celebrating like that guy messenger thought he was going to do and patting the guy on the back, David had him killed. It wasn't a joy for David to see Saul's evil, all that he had done, bring so much destruction and death. Like, it's not a joy for God to see His people perish, the Bible tells us. So it shouldn't be for us. Even when it's against us, there should be sorrow that it ever happened in the first place. Sorrow for that person's foolish and perhaps even evil decisions that they made that hurt us. Sorrow that it ever happened. See, we have a weird balance that we're called to in following Jesus. We should be supporters of justice. Justice is part of peace. And yet we're called to be givers of mercy. We should understand that actions do lead to consequences. I'm sorry, but they do. But we shouldn't rejoice when the consequences are bad and they're severe. This requires God for us to carry that balance to do a real profound work in our hearts and our minds. And fortunately, God inspired James to write to the first century church that all we had to do was ask God for wisdom and that God would be happy. You know, honestly, it doesn't take wisdom to create discord or hatred. It does not take you being a wise person to figure out how to create disunity or be a hateful person. It doesn't take wisdom to do that. It does take wisdom, though, to create peace. And let's be honest, peace in your own heart, peace between you and God, and peace between you and people that you like, and peace between you and your enemies is worth more than a ton of money, more than a successful life, and more than notoriety and being known by people. When you think about it. Really, peace is the profit of the wise person. It's what we win. It's one of the biggest gains we can have. We're at peace within ourselves. We're at peace with God. We're at peace with others. That is the profit of the wise person. And it talked about it in those verses about a harvest of righteousness. Righteousness is a bit of a churchy word. It's a good word, but it may be a little unclear. So it's about things being as they really are meant to be, in the right order, flourishing in absolute goodness, perfection, and full integrity. To collect on a harvest of that in your life. Can you imagine what it would be like to collect on a harvest like that in your life? Can you imagine if your outer life and your inner life were in sync and were functioning as they were meant to be? You were at peace within yourself. Can you imagine if you were living more and more like God designed you to live, flourishing in His calling that He has on your life? Can you imagine if your life was one where other people who spent time with you were leaving more whole and more healthy because of the time that they spent with you? Well, a harvest of righteousness, it says, is sown in peace by those who make peace. That's what should be left in your wake. And the chopper goes over, when the drone flies over, that's what should be left in your wake, in my wake. And that takes wisdom. Wisdom says, I need to trust God. I need to be humble. I need to seek out wise counselors. I need to make sure to exercise self-control. I need to intentionally use my words wisely to give life. I need to manage my resources well, and I need to sow seeds of peace, even if it means they're sown in the soil of my pain or my sweat. This is how you grow in wisdom. And this is how you accomplish the important work of foolproofing your life. Hey guys, I wanted to go ahead and give you an update when it comes to our building, as well as something else that we have coming up this fall. So when it comes to our building, we're gonna go ahead and move forward with just getting our contractor to bring the space up to code. We're gonna get the work done that needs to be done in order for the city to give us an occupancy permit. So we're not gonna have to spend near as much time or money at this point now to go ahead and just get it ready for us to meet in there. We're anxious to get in there, so that's the direction we're heading in, is to get in there sooner than later. I don't have still any firm dates or anything to give you, but I can let you know that's the direction we're heading in. So more on that soon, hopefully. And then also, as we head into the fall, every year for the last number of years, the fall time is such a restart. People are coming out of summer and all that kind of stuff, and we love to really be intentional about focusing in on what God has for us in this new season. So we've often in the years past done a week of prayer and fasting, and we're gonna do that again starting Monday, August 23rd. I'm gonna invite you to be a part of a live church, taking a few days and just praying and fasting together. We've got a group of people that have been working on content. It's gonna be focused this week together on the topic of self-control. What does it look like to really press into what God has for us on that? So it's funny because we just talked about that in this series, and we're gonna get to dive even deeper into it. But please mark those dates. We'll have more information for you on it. But starting Monday, August 23rd, we're doing our 7 days of praying and fasting, and we'd love for you to be a part of that. Best is yet to come. One more thing, the new series starts next week. It's on a topic that we honestly don't get to hear very much substance about in church, even though it's talked about so often in the Bible. It's a bit of a confusing topic. So I'm really excited as we talk about kindness in this new series we're calling Kind of a Big Deal.